Some stars of a popular auction show took a break at Tragically and never returned to your screens. What really happened to them?
Not everyone who came onto the Storage Wars auction floor was able to leave on their own terms. Some were taken too soon, some barely made it out alive, and others disappeared so quietly that no one in the audience even noticed they were gone, until the void they left was impossible to ignore. What actually happened to the faces that made this show what it was? And why is it only now that some of their stories are being told in full? Join us as we take a closer look at the beloved Storage Wars members who tragically passed away. Mark Balello. Mark Balello was one of the most entertaining personalities on Storage Wars. Known to the show as Rico Suave, he brought a certain energy to the auction floor that fans have never quite seen before. 2 seasons. That was as much time as the cameras got out of him. Then, February 2013 came and took it all away. Mark was arrested on suspicion of methamphetamine possession on February 9th of that year. The charge itself was serious enough, but what was devastating in retrospect was not the arrest, but it was what the arrest showed about where he already was privately before that day. And the charge. The charge was suddenly public, and something that had apparently been managed away from anyone who could have helped. A pressure that was faster than the people around him could respond to. 2 days later, Mark Balello was dead. Those 3 days between his arrest and his death are the part of the story that no amount of TV footage can fill in, because they all happened away from the cameras. In the private interior of a life the show had only ever documented from one angle. His lawyer at the time confirmed the death, but provided no details. Those who knew him personally were left to cope with a loss that had arrived without the kind of warning that allows you to brace yourself for it. What made the grief in the Storage Wars community particularly difficult to sit with was the particularity of what they were mourning. Anyone who watched him work the auction floor in his shiny suits saw nothing that resembled a person in crisis. It was confidence, all right. The charm was genuine. The entertainment value was there. And yet something else was real, too, happening in the spaces between the episodes, and no one caught it in time. His co-stars reacted with shock that was visibly unacted. The audience that had watched 2 seasons of him responded in the same way. And A&E, which had been airing the show that made his name recognizable, lost one of the most distinctive personalities it ever put on screen without any warning that the loss was coming. The Storage Wars community was still learning how to bear the weight of his absence, and they had no way of knowing this would not be the last goodbye they would have to say. 10 years later, a different loss was coming. Slower, more visible, and in some ways even harder to watch unfold. Gunter Nezoda. Gunter Nezoda, as a cast member, didn't require your attention. He was the kind who earned it quietly, over time, through a consistency of warmth and decency that made him, ultimately, one of the most universally loved personalities the show ever had. In September 2022, Gunter was diagnosed with lung cancer. He had been a smoker for some 30 years, and the damage 3 decades of smoking does is not announced until it has already done more than medicine can fully address. On March 22, 2023, Gunter Nezoda passed away peacefully in his sleep from complications related to lung cancer. He was 67 years old. His son, Renee, posted an emotional Instagram video confirming the news, describing in painful detail,
"My dad 6 months ago was diagnosed with lung cancer. He's been smoking for 30 years. And last night, he passed away in his sleep peacefully from complications."
the damage the cancer had done to his father's lungs, and the point at which the doctors had run out of options. The rawness of that video, a son talking about his father's death, while clearly still in the middle of the grief it produced, hit the Storage Wars community in a way that a formal press statement never could have. It felt like being let into something real, which was entirely appropriate for a man whose realness had always been his most defining quality. The tributes that followed from cast, crew, and longtime viewers reflected what Renee had described. People talked about a guy who never had an enemy on set, who brought a real enthusiasm to every day of filming, and whose presence made the show better, in ways that are difficult to quantify but easy to feel. Now he's gone. The particular shape of the hole he left behind was the shape of a person who had never tried to be anything but exactly who he was. And that is not a small thing to lose. Now the Storage Wars family had lost two of their own. And even though the community was still reeling from the impact of Gunter's death 3 years later, the loss that came in April 2026 would rattle them in a way that no one saw coming. Because this time, the story didn't end in illness. It ended with unanswered questions the whole community is still waiting to have answered. Daryl Sheets. In 2019, Daryl survived a widowmaker heart attack, one of the most fatal heart events a person can suffer. His artery was 95% blocked. He had congestive heart failure and a serious lung infection that occurred at the same time. He wrote from his hospital bed that he was a day or two from death, and the medical record entirely supported it. He survived, got stents put in, and finally made his way to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, where he opened an antique store and built something slower and quieter than 13 seasons of television had permitted. He remained on the show until 2023, then left the show entirely. Outside, it looked like a man taking the rest he had earned. According to reports, Daryl had been the target of sustained online harassment in the weeks leading up to April 2026. In an Instagram post on the day he died, Daryl's co-star, Renee Nizota, spoke about a specific individual who was allegedly relentlessly pursuing him, and said Daryl had been open about how much it was impacting him. Renee's message was about more than just Daryl's situation. It was about how a person's television presence tells you almost nothing about what they are privately carrying, and how cruelty pointed at someone online can push them somewhere you never intended.
Daryl has been posting a lot about the guy that's been cyberbullying him and tormenting him. And I really hope they look into that guy and it's just not a pass. Because it's just not right, guys. Be better.
Early morning hours of April 22nd, 2026, officers with the Lake Havasu City Police Department were dispatched to a residence located on Chandler Drive. They found Daryl Sheets dead. He was 67 years old. The Mojave County Medical Examiner ruled the death a suicide on May 5th, 2026. Toxicology came back totally clean. The investigation into alleged cyberbullying surrounding his death was still ongoing. His phone had been sent for forensic analysis. The unanswered questions may never be fully answered. Daryl Sheets, Gunter Nizota, and Mark Balello died in ways the Storage Wars family never fully recovered from. But they were not the only beloved faces to disappear from screens and never really return. Dan and Laura Dotson. Dan and Laura Dotson were not buyers. They weren't competing for lockers or building resale businesses. They were the auctioneers, the voices that dictated the pace of every auction sequence and gave the show its distinctive rhythm. Dan's super-speed chant and Laura's strong ringman presence were so ingrained in the fabric of Storage Wars that the majority of viewers didn't think twice about what the show would sound like without them. That question almost became something the audience had to answer on June 16, 2014. Dan woke up that morning in the early hours, asking strange questions in his sleep. This was unusual enough to concern Laura immediately. He said he didn't feel well and had double vision, so he went back to bed. A few hours after that, he got up to shower and fell down. Laura dialed 911 and gave CPR until the medics arrived. By the time he got to the hospital in Palm Springs, California, doctors had found out the extent of what was going on. Dan had suffered a double brain aneurysm, one behind his eye and one in his neck, that Laura told TMZ was the size of an apricot. The odds of surviving were not good. At the time, Hollywood Life reported that Dan had a 4 to 20% chance of surviving the operation needed to treat both aneurysms. An 8-hour procedure ensued while the Storage Wars community waited. At the end of the day, he survived. Against odds that most people wouldn't have bet on, Dan Dotson came through that surgery with his life intact and, as he later confirmed, without any permanent damage. Laura took to Twitter to thank people for their love and prayers, writing that Danny had pulled through a tough surgery and was now on his way to recovery. What makes this story even more amazing is a detail that most people found nearly impossible to believe at the time. It is reported that producers from A&E rushed to the hospital upon hearing what was going on and filmed parts of the surgery itself with Laura, confirming to TMZ that the procedure had been filmed and would likely be included in Season 6 of the show. The cameras followed Dan and Laura into the scariest night of their lives together, which says something very specific about the relationship between reality television and the people who live inside of it. Dan returned to Storage Wars and continued his role as auctioneer with Laura. Every auction sequence that was filmed after June of 2014 exists because an 8-hour surgery went the right way on a night that could have easily gone the other way entirely. But the near-death experiences in the Storage Wars family did not end with Dotson, and the next came 5 years later on a California street with one of the show's most beloved original cast members. Barry Weiss. Barry Weiss departed Storage Wars after Season 4 in 2013, explaining later that he had just had enough and wanted to get out while the show was still at its peak. He talked about going back to what he called being a world-class slacker, a line only Barry could deliver with total sincerity. Fans wondered what he was up to in the years after he left and whether he'd ever come back. Then, in April 2019, the news that came was not the kind anyone had been hoping for. Barry was riding motorcycles with his buddy Jamie Robinson through the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles when a car pulled out of a parking space right in front of them. No time to do anything about it. Both men were hit by the vehicle. Later that day, Jamie posted from the hospital that he had broken his knee, elbow, and wrist in the crash, and added that his friend was in considerably worse condition, asking people to send prayers to Barry. The world mostly learned of what happened from that Instagram post. Barry had suffered serious trauma to his chest and legs, including internal injuries and many broken bones. He was brought to the ICU and spent 2 full months in the hospital, while undergoing multiple surgeries on his back and on his femur. There were also unconfirmed reports during his recovery that he had suffered a stroke while in hospital, but this was never formally confirmed by anyone close to him. What was confirmed was the injuries were so bad that rumors started to spread online that he hadn't survived the crash at all, which is the particular kind of rumor that only gets started when the situation is really bad enough that it makes it believable. He came back in 2021 for Season 14, pulling up in a 1939 Lincoln Zephyr, rolling the window down, and asking the cast if they missed him. It was a Barry entrance, theatrical and charming and totally on brand. But behind that entrance was a man who had been rebuilding himself for 2 years after an accident that had truly threatened his life. In 2023, he was in Season 15, and then he stepped back again for no reason. By Season 16 in 2025, he was gone with no public announcement either from him or A&E as to what changed or if he would ever return. Barry Weiss came much closer to not coming back than most of his fans will ever know. And the brief seasons the audience got with him in 2021 and 2023 now carry a weight they did not have at the time. But Barry wasn't the only Storage Wars personality whose health almost ended his story before the viewers were ready to say goodbye. Dave Hester. Dave Hester was many things on Storage Wars. Subtle was not one of them. He was loud, he was bold, he was unashamedly competitive, and his presence on the auction floor generated the kind of tension that kept audiences watching even when they said they couldn't stand him. He was the villain that the show needed, and the buyer whose instincts were sharp enough that you respected him even when you were rooting against him. In November 2018, Dave woke up in the middle of the night feeling sick and having trouble breathing. His girlfriend rushed him to hospital in Newport Beach, California, where doctors found he had suffered a hemorrhagic stroke. Further testing revealed the underlying cause. He was living with severe sleep apnea, so severe that his breathing stopped more than 100 times every hour while he slept. That lack of oxygen plus dangerously high blood pressure had caused the stroke, while he had been unconscious and completely unaware of what was happening to him. He spent days in the ICU and then was transferred to a skilled nursing facility for a month of intensive rehab. Almost a year after his stroke, he was still not quite back to normal by September 2019. He was gone for seasons 13, 14, and 15 entirely, and that was 3 full seasons away from the show he had helped define from its very first episode. That something that happened in his own body, while he was asleep, could bring a man who built his whole on-screen persona around dominance and control to a complete stop was a special kind of humbling that the cameras never got to document. His co-stars were surprised when he returned for season 16 in 2025, and they had all sorts of genuine feelings about it. No one had really figured he'd be back. The stroke had, for a long time, felt like it could be permanent. His return was one of the most surprising developments the show had produced in years, and a reminder that sometimes the people a community has quietly given up on are still doing the invisible work of coming back. But not all of the Storage Wars family members who disappeared had health as their reason for stepping away. And the next story is one that the audience watched unfold in real time without fully understanding what they were seeing. Brandy Passante and Jared Schultz. Brandy Passante and Jared Schultz were the soul of Storage Wars for 12 seasons. Not because they were the best bidders, but because they looked like real people living real life together in front of an audience. A couple in business, raising 2 kids, arguing over money and strategy, and somehow holding it all together over the years of filming. The sense of authenticity was the basis of everything the show built around them, which is why the reveal in the season 13 premiere in April 2021 hit so many longtime viewers so hard. Brandy sat down in front of the camera and told the viewers she was no longer with Jared. They had broken up once they finished shooting season 12, which premiered in November 2018. What happened in the years after the split was a lot more serious than a breakup. Jared was involved in an incident at a bar in Lake Forest, California, in April 2021, when he allegedly pushed Brandy twice during an intense confrontation. He was charged by the Orange County District Attorney's Office in May 2021 with 1 count of misdemeanor domestic violence battery. He pled not guilty. There was a DUI charge in 2021 and a resisting an officer charge from July 2019 that was still open. So he was juggling 3 criminal cases at once while his TV career was ending without a formal goodbye. Brandy did not issue a formal statement on the charges, but posted to Instagram during National Domestic Violence Awareness Month in October 2021 with a message that domestic violence does not discriminate by race, gender, economic status, or social status. The rest of what she needed to say was said with a tattoo she revealed the same month, the word free with a sparrow flying out of a cage, along with a caption about escaping a difficult situation and being thankful for the life she now got to live without fear, without her having to name anyone directly. In 2025, Brandy continued on Storage Wars through season 16 and built a new public chapter for herself. Jared disappeared from social media. His professional pursuits quietly disappeared without a trace, and the partnership that had provided the show with 12 seasons worth of its most human storytelling came to an end in a way that left the audience with far more questions than the cameras ever answered. But while Brandy and Jared's departure was prompted by events that spilled into public view, the next cast member who left did so entirely on her own terms, and for reasons far more personal than dramatic. Ivy Calvin. Ivy Calvin was known as the King of Palmdale from the moment he joined Storage Wars in Season 3, and the nickname was no exaggeration. He'd been a professional arena football player and mixed martial arts fighter before he got into the resale world, and that athletic background gave his bidding style a physicality and aggression that made him stand out from just about everyone else on the auction floor. In 2009, he opened his thrift store, Grandma's Attic in Palmdale, California, and brought his sons into his work both on and off screen, making it clear from early on that what he was building was meant to outlast his own participation in it. After his most prominent seasons, Ivy's appearances on the show became noticeably less frequent. All anyone knew was that he'd been seriously injured in a fishing accident, when a rogue wave had slammed him into some coral, hard enough to need medical attention. The injury was a surprise and a reminder that the body he'd forged through years of professional athletics was not immune to the sorts of unexpected setbacks that forever alter a person's priorities. He had also been quietly wrestling with what sustained participation in a reality television show demands of a person who has a family, a business, and a life that exists entirely outside of what the cameras capture. By season 16 in 2025, Ivy was back in a more visible capacity, as if whatever had called him away from the center of the show during those interim seasons had been addressed in ways he chose to keep private. There was never a dramatic parting of ways, never a statement made about stepping back. He just became less around, the way people do when the thing that once seemed central to their life slowly stops being the most important thing in the room. And the next Storage Wars cast member to vanish did so in a way even quieter, even more deliberate, and perhaps more final than anyone who saw her leave in the first place appreciated at the time. Mary Padian. Mary Padian was a regular buyer on Storage Wars from Season 6 through Season 12, and in those years she developed a following that responded to something specific about her presence on the show. She was not attempting to be the most aggressive bidder or the most dramatic personality. She was truly excited about the things she found, truly warm with the people around her, and truly herself, in a way that the format of the show sometimes made difficult for people on the cast to maintain over many seasons. Her last appearance was a single episode in Season 13 in 2021, and that episode was basically a goodbye that the audience almost missed. Before heading back to Texas, Brandy Passante took her to one last California auction and told the audience she was going home. She didn't hold a press conference. She did not write a long farewell statement. She just said she was going home, which was the most honest thing anyone on the show had said about leaving it. She relocated to Texas, continued to run her online store, Mary's Finds, and got involved with Ubuntu Life, a Kenyan charity providing sustainable employment for women through handcrafted products. She created a life less public than the one the show gave her, and, it seems, far more satisfying in the ways that count when the cameras aren't there. When Daryl Sheets passed away in April 2026, Mary shared a tribute to him on her Instagram story that included a throwback photo from their time together on the show and wrote that some people become part of a chapter of your life that you never forget, and that he would be missed. That tribute said something about who Mary Padian is, on the show and off. She found her way back to the things that mattered to her, and she did it without drama or announcement or any of the public processing that departures from reality television usually require. A quiet, deliberate exit is its own kind of remarkable thing, considering everything else this cast has gone through. And the final cast member on this list exited in a similarly quiet way, though the reasons for it were ones most of his fans never ceased to wonder about. Kenny Crossley. Kenny Crossley was never the loudest personality on Storage Wars, but he was one of the most genuinely likable. He brought a southern charm and an easy humor to the auction floor, and he was the sort of cast member you noticed, not because he was demanding your attention, but simply because his presence made the whole thing more enjoyable. He was there for the lockers, but what he really loved were the people. And that warmth came through in every episode he was in. He had starred with Barry Weiss in the short series Storage Wars. Barry Strikes back in 2015 and 2016, which hinted at a level of comfort and genuine friendship between the two that was more than what the cameras demanded of them. He'd also been growing side ventures during his time on the show, so his career was never 100% tied to being on Storage Wars. And then, Kenny suddenly disappeared without any announcement or explanation. No closure episode. No social media posts explaining what had been changed. No statement from A&E about his future on the show. One season he was there, and the next he wasn't. And the audience that had truly enjoyed his presence was left with nothing but the absence itself, and the question of what had happened to fill the space where an answer should have been. The fans kept asking about him. Even years after his final episode aired, people still searched his name, wondering how he was doing and if he would ever return to the auction floor that made him famous. Some cast members leave Storage Wars, and the show quickly absorbs their leaving. Kenny Crossley wasn't one of those cast members. The warmth he brought to the show was not something that the production could just redistribute to the rest of the personalities, and the audience that responded to it knew that from the moment he went off the air. He built his side businesses, stayed connected to the people he had met through the show, and maintained a lower public profile than the one Storage Wars had given him. Whether he will ever return to the show or whether his last episode was genuinely his last is a question that nobody has officially answered. And sometimes the questions that never get answered are the ones that stay with an audience the longest. Which of these stories touched you the most? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.